$250,000 when we established that partnership or built that system. And now that we're at the $1 million mark and we're pushing our way to 8 figures, that system, that partnership isn't going to work anymore. Welcome to the 7-Figure Educator podcast. My name is Dr. Erica Jordan Thomas, and I am your host. I'm a former teacher, former principal, Harvard grad, and full-time entrepreneur running a 7-figure education consulting business. During this episode, I want to help you redefine the storm. So if you have listened to any other of our episodes or just talked to an entrepreneur in general, you're going to start to see a common pattern happen when folks start to tell you their story around how they started their business. Typically, it's the story centers around some type of disruption. And what I like to say is that disruption always precedes transformation. Disruption could be something changes at your job. Disruption could be something in your personal life where now you're just sick and tired of being sick and tired. Disruption could be something that's happening in the world that now causes you to view the world differently. For me, disruption was, I was a principal and was being told that the following year, 300 kids would be added to my school because of boundary line changes. And my pay was going to stay the same. For me, that was a sense of disruption of my school was getting ready to do a 180 and I was going to have to start over from the perspective of building culture, building our instructional infrastructure. And for me, I had to deeply question if I wanted to do that because I knew the answer was no. So for me, the disruption was things were changing in my 9-to-5 that caused me to start looking at the next opportunity. And it felt like a storm because for the longest, I just knew that being a principal was my life's work, where I actually did not have the next goal planned out because I was so fulfilled in my role as a principal. And now here comes this decision that feels like it's coming out of left field that completely causes disruption in my professional life. And when I look back on that moment, I can now put it in perspective of it was the catalyst to transformation because it was that decision that led to me accepting that that was going to be my last year as a school principal. And it was that moment that actually caused me to make the decision to start my education consulting business. And now, fast forward almost 6 years later, my business is 7 figures. So I wanted to have this conversation during this episode of redefining the storm because I know that there are so many of you who just feel yourself spinning in the tornado and it feels really personal. It feels very overwhelming and it's hard to see on the other side of it. And during this episode, I wanted to give you the language to help you reframe the moment, to help you reframe the opportunity that you have to take that moment by its horns and actually be able to control the transformation that is awaiting for you. So during our conversation, I actually wanted to use an anchor text that I have found to be very helpful for me on my journey of making sense of the storms. And this book was actually recommended to me by my therapist because she just knew that it would be something that I could lean on and anchor in to help give me the words and language to make meaning of what I was experiencing. Hey there, I know you're enjoying this great conversation. However, I want to make sure that we are connected and specifically in these Instagram streets. So go ahead, take a moment, head over to Instagram while you're listening and follow me at _Jordan Thomas on Instagram. You could also just go to the show notes and click the link, but give me a follow to make sure that we're connected. And I'll see you in the IG streets, my friend. The name of the book is Vibrate Higher Daily by Lalah Delia. And in the book, she talks about the 4 types of storm that you will experience and go through in your life. And I found the language to be so helpful to make meaning to the different types of storms that I've experienced, I am experiencing, and will continue to experience on the journey to and through 7 and 8 figures. I wanted to share those 4 types with you. The first type of storm that she names is the desert. The desert, she names, is a place of isolation. The purpose of the desert is to get you really clear on who you are. And that level of clarity will only come when you are still, when you have eliminated all the distractions, and in silence. So it feels like you're alone. It feels like you're kind of just out in a canoe in a big, huge ocean river, but you're actually in the desert. And think about the power and impact that the desert is positioning you for, the impact of getting really clear on who you are. So I wanted to give you a quick example of how I've experienced the desert in my own leadership journey. So this was around 2011. I was a resident principal at the time, and I was having a very challenging experience. And that experience was challenging because, quite frankly, it was the leader I was working under. It was really hard because of my identity, identifying as a Black woman and the relationship or the lack of relationship that I didn't have with my supervisor at the time. It just felt really hard. And in the midst of that, there were just a lot of things happening at the school that I was a resident principal of, and I just felt like I was so alone because I was a resident principal, so I was there for a year learning and studying under a principal to where there was no one else in the building that had that same role as me. And now I'm having all of these nuances in my experience of how I'm managing the relationship with my then supervisor, and then all these nuances of changes happening at the school. I just felt like there weren't many people who could relate to that experience. I was experiencing some level of isolation during that. And now, over a decade later, I can look back on that experience and know that that experience actually made me really clear on who I was and who I am. That experience made my values so incredibly clear to me. It anchored me in my values. It made my valuables unshakable because I had the experience of being able to drown out the noise, of being able to minimize distractions, so that way I can see and feel who I was at my core. Because when you are in the desert, you are going to be faced with choices that you normally couldn't see, choices that would be drowned out by all of the noise, all of the things. You are going to be forced to face who you are and make a decision. So the purpose of the desert is to push you to get really clear on who you are. The second type of storm is the mountain. The author defines the mountain as the obstacle. It's about raising your awareness. It's about raising your spiritual resilience and your perspective. So when I think about a mountain type of experience that I have, and even when I think about the word mountain, I literally think about climbing or ascending. The purpose of the mountain is to build your resiliency. It's to build the muscle prior to the next mountain, right? Because if you can't climb the hill, you're not going to be able to climb the next mountain. So when I think about a mountain moment that I've had in my own personal experience, it was hosting my very first ever live event. I had made the decision to host a live event. And actually, my goal and vision was to host it in 2 years. And I had actually made the decision to host it in the upcoming 9 months. And making that decision, it caused me and forced me to do a lot of new things at one time. I had to, for the first time, learn how to work with hotels. I had to, for the first time, learn our sales strategy for an event. I had to learn food and beverage minimums. I had to learn about hotel blocks. I had to learn about AV. There were so many aspects to an event that I was a first timer in experiencing. And I'm grateful that I partnered with an event planner to help hold my hand through that process. But I also had to learn how to work with an event planner and learning their roles and responsibilities. And going through that experience of a mountain of all these new things at once has positioned me to do another live event even bigger and better. So the purpose of the mountain is to build your endurance, to build your muscle, to build your resilience. The third type of storm is the ocean. Life happens in tidals and waves. The ocean moves you to higher levels of balance and self-control. This terrain also relaxes you, restores, and purifies you during the process. So if you think about almost a really turbulent waters of how you're like going and being pushed back and forth, that type of back and forth tidal wave process is causing you to purify. It's causing you to restore. I almost think about the spiritual aspect of water. It's flushing you anew. That is the purpose of the ocean. When I think about my ocean moment, I think about the few months right after I crossed the 7-figure mark in my business. Those few months I like to call 7-figure dissonance. And the reason why I say the word dissonance is because that's what I felt. In the moment, I felt this joy and almost like euphoric energy that I had accomplished this huge milestone in my business that I had been focused on for a good time. But then the dissonance part of this was it didn't feel like what I expected it to feel like. So disappointment is when expectations don't meet reality. And my expectations of what 7 figures would look like and feel like was not what I was experiencing, because actually what I was experiencing was that my business was breaking again. Because I've had my business for 6 years. We've been growing so rapidly every year. Every year I have doubled the revenue in my business, which means if I've had a system for a year or 2 years, my business would be a half to the fourth of a size that it was in comparison to today. So now that I'm at the 7-figure mark, there are some systems that I had that we were $500,000 when we built that system. Some partnerships and systems we had, we were $250,000 when we established that partnership or built that system. And now that we're at the $1 million mark and we're pushing our way to 8 figures, that system, that partnership isn't going to work anymore, which forces us to redefine. And it becomes our ocean. It forces us to restore. It forces us to find self-balance. It forces us to purify, right? Where we might be in the tidal wave of this 7-figure dissonance, but the benefit of that, and now we have to break down in order to build up and set us up for our next milestone of 8 figures. And then the final type of storm that Delia mentions in the book is the fog. The fog is a place where you cannot see your way clearly. You feel stuck and you have to stop and get clarity. One of my fog moments actually happened the year before I went full-time in my business, and it's actually the reason why I decided to go full-time in my business. So at the time, I was a full-time doctoral student. It was my final year of my program. I was completing a residency where I was working for an organization while writing my dissertation, and I was not having a good relationship with my supervisor. I actually had moments that I experienced that were microaggressions where I just didn't feel respected. I actually felt disrespected, and it caused me to feel stuck, right? It caused me, as a woman who had over a decade of experience in education, someone who had led a school of over 1,000 middle school students, a staff of over 100, grew to be ranked in the top 1% of the state. It caused me to feel stuck because now I'm on a team of someone who's asking me, do I want to manage someone to get more management experience? Right. And so I'm feeling this sense of stuckness or lack of clarity because here I am operating from this paradigm that to work means having a 9 to 5, means working for someone else. And I feel stuck because I'm attempting to operate from what I know and operate from that definition of working, but it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good to work for somebody else. And yeah, I had my side hustle, but I had not been exposed to a thorough vision of entrepreneurship to yet see myself in that. And here I was having these experiences that felt like I was unsafe, operating in a system that wasn't created for me. So it's actually not a realistic expectation to expect safety, to expect belonging from an organization and a system that was not built for Black women. But I didn't know what were the other options. When the option was clear, it was like work for myself, like create a business, because the only place I can guarantee my safety is in my own business. But because I did not have anyone else that I really knew in my family who was an entrepreneur, it didn't feel like it was within reach. So I felt this fog season. I felt this fog moment of feeling stuck, of I can't get another job and risk my sense of belonging, risk my safety, but also entrepreneurship doesn't feel like that's something I can go after. And what I realized in continuing that experience is just that I have to bet on myself. If I can't trust myself, who can I trust, right? That there's the opportunity for me to have limitless revenue, limitless income, limitless impact in my own business. And when I got really clear on my own power to be able to create what my heart's desire was, then that's when I knew moving into my business full time was what I needed to do. So those are our 4 types of storm: the desert, the mountain, the ocean, and the fog. And so my question to you is, if you are feeling a sense of disruption right now, are you in your desert? Are you on your mountain? Are you being pushed back and forth in the ocean? Are you making your way through the fog? Whatever you define your moment as, I want you to know, understand, and believe that you are right on the other side of your transformation. I'm excited for you. I'm excited for your transformation that's to come. And I will tell you to keep going. Keep pressing. That's all I have for this episode. And I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the 7 Figure Educator Podcast.